Steve lives in the greater San Diego area, and Steve has been building an HOn3 RGS in an office trailer since 1995. The layout itself is about 9 by 24 foot. The layout is a bi-level semi-mushroom design with something very unique to most layouts, an elevator. He hosts monthly operating sessions for members of the narrow gauge cabal in Southern California who travel from about 5 neighboring counties to attend. He has published over 30 articles which have appeared in the Gazette and MR, and he's a member of the Narrow Gauge Hall of Fame. So with that, Steve, over to you.
Much, Pete. And incidentally, congratulations to you for that magnificent photo that's on the back cover of the Gazette this month of your layout in the PBL ad. That is just gorgeous. And you are to be complimented on that, you and your crew. I'm honored to have been selected to present a tour here on the Off the Beaten Track. I'm a little concerned about following Ken Ellers, though, with my photography and my modeling. I don't think if I'd known this was going to happen, I don't think I would have gone for this. But anyway, here I am. As you said, I do live in the rural San Diego County area. I modeled a Rio Grande Southern from Durango to Ridgeway in 1939 in HOn3. The RGS, for those of you that are not RGS guys, ran from 1891 all the way to 1951. But just a year and a half after it started running, or made from one end to the other, it went into bankruptcy. And it was pretty much in bankruptcy off and on, or in under very bad management for the rest of its life. By 1939, which is the year I chose to model, it was the epitome of deferred maintenance. A lot of things were run down and tired and worn out, and therefore fun to model. And that was also 1939, the first year of the Sunrise Herald. And I need to put my pointer into a laser pointer here. And here's the Sunrise Herald here. That's what the Sunrise Herald is that we're always talking about. I have built my layout one section at a time. I think you said that. I'll try not to repeat you. But I've enjoyed the journey. I've been doing it for years, and I'm still not quite finished, as you'll see. All of my rail is hand-laid, code 55. And all the turnouts are scratch built, and some of or about a third of the switch stands are operating. And before they go to sleep, I would like to acknowledge my friends who have helped: Jake Johnson, Herb Koenig, Greg Gray, Joe D'Elia, Michael Pulling, Phil Hermsmeyer, Jerry Jackson, Dave Bolzer, Duncan McCreast, Steve Bradley, legendary Mike Blazek, who's an architect that's drawn plans for every narrow gauge structure in Colorado, and he still sells them, and Robin Becker, and the late, great Dave Garcia. Get myself situated, there we go. Here's the office trailer that Pete talked about. When I bought it in 1993, even then it was a ratty old office trailer. But I refurbished it and remodeled it. And when I got it over to my house here, because it was at a different location originally, moved it over to my house, and you can see it's right next to my garage, and my shop is right inside here. So it's very convenient. But when I got it over there, my wife said, no, 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 no. So I had to panel it. And as you can see, even though I had it painted just this last year, the paint's starting to drool, so I need to do something about that. The interior, I think Pete said, is 9'1" by 35 feet. And here's a picture of the door of the trailer itself. This sign was on the front door, or the passenger door anyway, of the Durango Depot for many years. And my friend Jake Johnson had a copy of that made for me, and a big decal, and we put that on the door there. I think it's pretty cool. Here's my shop. That door enters into my shop now, which is in the back of the trailer. You can see that I have a sink here with running water, and which flows out onto the ground, I might add, out into the gravel. And all my stuff, just like your stuff, lots of lighting. Here's my spray booth over here with a vent to it too. My shop is 9'1" by 7'8". Except that's supposed to change. What did I do wrong here? There we go. Here's the RGS route map, and I won't take too much time with this, but first of all, this is supposed to be a map of Colorado, but it didn't quite come out square with when the way I scanned this, I guess. And the RGS ran down in the lower southwest corner, the most beautiful section of the world, as far as I'm concerned. It's just every time you drive it, it gets prettier and prettier and prettier. And it ran from Durango to Ridgeway. I modeled the towns of Durango and Dolores and Rico and Ophir and Vance Junction and Telluride and Placerville and Dallas Divide and Ridgeway. The RGS connected with the DNRGW at both ends, both the northern end and the southern end. They couldn't quite, the DNRGW couldn't quite get through that mountain there over what's now the $1 Million Highway from Silverton to Urinay. If you've ever driven that, you know it's a very, very steep grade there. I reversed, incidentally, on my layout, Ophir and Rico, and you'll see why in just a minute. This is a track plan that ran in Model Railroader in June of '09. My layout size, again, is 24 by 9, and it's a true point-to-point layout. It's a bi-level layout with Durango here on the front aisle, and I'm going to show you now in the cutaway and the cross-section. Here's Durango on the peninsula facing the front aisle, and here's Telluride on the lower level of that same peninsula facing the back aisle. So I'm told that makes it a semi-mushroom layout, or at least a semi-mushroom peninsula. Originally, I built a helix here, but it had 7 loops, and for years that was fine. But once you see a little train going around 7 loops a few times, you get kind of tired of it, because of course our stuff goes slowly, pardon me. And so a friend of mine, Joe D'Elia, talked me into taking the helix out and putting in an elevator, or a grade separation equalizer, I like to call it. And I'll show you that in a few minutes. There's about 130 feet of main line, and that doesn't count the yards and the spurs. And we're now looking down the main aisle here with the arrow here. And here's a picture of that main aisle. Looking down across, and here's a hinged bridge that goes across the main aisle. It's hinged right here with interlocking, so that this turnout here throws for the main line when the bridge is down. This is Ridgeway here on the lower level, and that's the state of it right now. It's still under construction. And this is Durango up here on the peninsula, up here on the upper level. Here's a front aisle view now on the track plan, looking at Durango. And again, Durango's look here on the cross section. And I'm just showing off here. This was the cover model Railroader in what, July of '09. And I think that I may have been the first one to publish a photograph with smoke in it, with Photoshop smoke. Everybody was doing cotton up until then, but I think I was the first one, and that may have been that may have been the picture right there. But I'm just showing, I'm sorry. Here's a long shot of Durango. The backdrop was done by Greg Gray from St. Louis. He came out, I think, 3 different times, and he did a great job. Greg is a narrow gauge guy. He knows the RGS very well, and he did a magnificent job for me, and I'm really happy with it. If you know Durango, you know that's Durango just by looking at Greg's backdrop. I did not model any engine facilities in Durango, partly because I didn't have room here on the peninsula, and I wanted to build a town here too. Thirdly, the RGS didn't use the engine facilities in Durango, and they used West Durango across the river. And I'll tell you why in a minute. But we have some switching here. There's an ice house here built to Mike Blazek plans, and some sheds here. And here is a warehouse and the section house here. And down here is downtown. This is, of course, the depot. This is a rags kit. And I think I'm going to show it to you again. No, I'm not. I'm going to go back. I'm sorry. Well, I'm going to tell you anyway, that Rags kit was a great kit. Very, very impressive instructions. If you've ever built a Rags kit, you know how good he is in putting together a kit. But when I got all done with it, I realized it wasn't my kit. It wasn't my structure, I mean. So every building, every wood building or stone building since then, I have scratch built. Buildings such as you're seeing here, I built from modified kits. Now you are looking at a picture from that I got from the Denver Public Library, and you can see all of the awnings here on the sunny side of the street, and the neat signs hanging out over the sidewalks, and the wall signs, and there's more, and lots of window blinds and curtains and stuff to model. And so here's a little closer look at my main street. It curves around here, and so does the track behind it. The yard does, or at least the lead to the yard does. You can see the awnings there, and the wall signs here. This is a decal I made out in Photoshop. I will keep saying Photoshop, and I apologize. I mean Photoshop Elements when I say that. I do not use Photoshop. I'm not that advanced, but everything I do is just in Photoshop Elements. Jake Johnson is a professional model builder. So when he asked me if I'd like to have him build this kit for me, I said, well, yeah, sure. And so he did, and he put downspouts and some other neat stuff on it that were not already. Some vents up here on the roof and some other stuff. And he did a great job, and windows and curtains and so forth and so on. So I had to make that sign the J. Johnson Furniture Company. And here's the other end of that main street. On the awnings, I stole the patterns from the internet awning stores, and then resized them in Photoshop Elements. And sometimes you make different colors on them. Here I printed J.C. Penney on the front, and also the sidewalk signs. Those are kits, but the plastic part or kits, the styrene part, but the lettering is all from Photoshop that I stole or generated myself. This one I was self-generated in Photoshop Elements. Here's the back of that building. You can see here's a couple of some shades here, but the main thing I wanted to show you here, a couple things, is the dry climate sign. I think I took a picture of that sign in Salida, if I'm not mistaken. If that rings a bell with anybody, years ago. I mean, I'm talking in the 70s. And of course, I had it for years and years, wanting to use it sometime. Made a decal out of it, resized and faded it out in Photoshop, and then made a decal out of it and put it here on this structure. The circus posters are just printed on regular photo paper, and then sprayed with dull coat and turned over, and you rub them with spit until all of the paper comes off, and you ruin a few. In fact, that's what I did, ruin this one, but I still was able to make use out of it. The stone foundation is weird, but it is a solution, the only solution I could come up to a problem that was caused by a change of plans. Originally, this was going to be the yard about set back here a ways, but the yard was going to be in front of the town. And so, or the town wasn't going to be here at all. And so I wanted an undulating landform. And I thought, well, that's neat. I'll just router out my fascia, which I've done elsewhere on the layout. But then when I changed my plans, I had to figure out something to do that. So I did this, and I'm hopeful that it's not too distracting. People do ask about it, and it's just a train set, you know. Now we're going to depart Durango, more showing off. And now we're going to go back to the track plan and look across that hinged bridge I showed you a little earlier. And here's a shot taken from that same angle, looking now at the main line, which goes from Durango to West Durango, which is down over here. And here is where it is, and this is Lightner Creek. I think that's Lightner Creek that goes behind the West Durango terminal. And this was called passenger depot. And here's the engine house and what they called the goose barn. Here's that passenger depot, so-called by the RGS. I don't know if that's a passenger waiting for the goose to arrive or whatever, but watch your step, folks. That platform is a little bit rough there. And here's my model of the passenger depot and the engine facility and the goose barn. The RGS moved the engine facilities to West Durango and built all this stuff in 1934 under the receiver Victor Miller, the bankruptcy receiver. And he bragged that he had saved $7,214 the first year. So I guess it worked out for them. Moving on down now, there's a grade that goes from West Durango along this wall here all the way up to Dolores. So it goes through a cut here, which I'll show you. My very last slide was taken right about well, maybe about right here. But now we're going to look at what I call the Silver Bill mill and mine. Here's the mine up here. Here's a couple of miner shacks. Pardon me. And the mill over here. Here's a prototype picture of the superintendent's home, probably. Looks like somebody's living there with the laundry out there. And a different mill than I modeled. And I don't remember why I modeled this. I modeled this so long ago that frankly, I don't remember why I didn't build this mill. I'm not even sure if it's really the butterfly mill that I modeled. And I'm not sure why I rusted it so heavily, except I kind of liked the technique I came on there of putting in those days, we didn't have Bragdon powders. So I was just using a mixture of chalks to get that rusty effect onto wet paint. I thought that looked pretty cool, but it's too rusty. But it's scratch built. Now we're going to move on down to the corner to my Dolores, and I'm showing arrows now on both the upper level and the lower level, because I'm going to show you, you'll see Dolores and on the top and Placerville here on the bottom. Now, Dolores should be modeled in an entire room, not just this little tiny corner. But I wanted to get some of the structures in, or at least some parts of some of the structures in. So here is my Dolores. And I'm going to show you an aerial view here, looking at the back of the town, only so that you can see that there is a branch line here that goes to the Montezuma Lumber Company. And of course, we spot cars there. This is the bean warehouse, which was built from Blazek plans, sort of. This doesn't look much like Blazek's plans, but it does have it does have the tower and the dormer windows here. A couple of those architectural features. And here's a little bit better view, a more artistic view anyway, of the scene from the ground, sort of the ground level. This store was published, I think it's either Joe Cree or Cray, and I'm sorry, I do not know how to pronounce his name, but he published that probably in the Gazette 100 years ago. In, I think it was HOn3, I've forgotten, but it was large scale, and it was just a really, really cool store. So I scratch built it here and just plopped it down in my Placerville. Had to have somewhere to do it. There's the depot. Here's a prototype picture of the depot. Notice that the RGS depot here didn't have too much of the RGS signature architecture. It had the signature chimney, and it had the eave fretwork here, and also the awning supports. But other than that, and the cross brick and the molding across here, and of course the wainscoting along the edge here. But in RGS guys know that's an RGS depot. But other depots had more stuff on them. Here's my model of that same depot with the fancy work up here under the architecture, under the eaves, and also the awning support, and my sign on the end. Now we're going to move down around into Ophir on the upper level. And I'm showing two arrows here again, because this picture shows two levels. And you're going to see Windy Point right here, where there's a sharp curve, and it's really just kind of a seam divider. Here's Windy Point right here, dividing the seam on this small layout between my Dolores and the world famous Ophir. This is bridge, what there is of it. I'm embarrassed to say that's bridge 45B for you RGS guys. And here is a prototype picture of Ophir showing, and this I have this in here, and I'll leave it up for a long time because I know that the Tweetsy and the EBT guys and the main 2-footer guys love to see pictures of Ophir. And so I'm just going to leave this one up for a while. But it has the tram house and the depot, and the boarding house is here. This is the Oilton Club, which was a saloon, and Mrs. Skillion's store here. And here's my model of those structures, all built, all scratch built using Blazek plans. And here we are going to depart Ophir. And this would be bridge 45A, I guess. Not I guess, I know it is. Now we're going to turn around about a 180 from that Windy Point I showed you. Exactly 180, and I've got the sun in my eyes right now. I may have to duck down for, well, the sun will go down behind my oak tree out there in a minute. And I'm going to show you the end of the peninsula. And here's what it looks like. That's why the top of my head looks all shiny, because I've got the sun on my head up there above my computer. Let me check my notes to make sure I don't miss anything. This is the end of the peninsula. Here's Durango over here on the left upper level, and Telluride is on the lower level over here, down here facing the back aisle. These are the throttles are in A-line throttle pockets, and these are rail op switch lists, which I really like. I use the real old version of rail op, and it still worked for me. It hasn't been supported for years, but now I understand that there is a new company out there, somebody that is putting rail op out there, and it'll either generate your switch list for you, or using your parameters, or you can generate it yourself. And I like doing it myself, so I can make it more complicated and make guys move cars to get to the other cars and so forth. I like to be evil when I do that. We operate with 4 2-man crews, thus 4 switch lists, and we all squeeze into these narrow aisles at the same time. As Pete mentioned, we have a monthly gathering of the narrow gauge cabal of Southern California. And being narrow gaugers, we are by definition, and I think you will all agree, by definition, superior modelers. And we all are modelers. Some guys have open houses and they have operating sessions, but our guys are modelers first, and they operate too. I don't like to have guys come that just operate that aren't great modelers. Doug Ramos, who did the tour in February, is one of our members. And Jim Vale came 450 miles one time to attend. So we made him an honorary member. And we eat hot dogs, and we show and tell, and we share ideas and opinions, and we operate. And we sit around and lie to each other then about what great models that we built and how we did it. And then here, now we're going to look on the back, down the back aisle. And here's a picture of it. Bear in mind that I built these 2 levels along several years apart, being in that I build one section at a time. Rico is 62 inches high, which is Rico's down here in the corner. And Vance Junction down here, the rail height is 37 inches. And the aisle width, and also Telluride's also over here, and it is also 37 inches. The aisle width here varies from a very tight 27 inches to a very spacious very tight 25 inches to a very spacious 27 inches. Now, being that they were modeled years apart, the conifers on the upper level were made with the old furnace filter tree method. And then when I started modeling the lower level, I started using the Mackenzie Brothers bottle brush machine. I have one of the old crank ones, and I've used it, as you can see, I've used it a lot. So I'm happy with it. And I think they make a lot better trees than the old furnace filter trees. but I'm not about to go back and replace the upper ones. Looking at the track plan again, going down the back aisle now, we're going to look at Rico on the upper level of the back aisle. And I need a drink, hold on. This is a great prototype picture of Rico. And if you've driven this road, this highway, you know that it goes through town, and it still does go through town. And some of those old structures are still there. And it shows, so the picture shows the town on the bluff above the river here. And the Pro Patria Mill is here. And the road running down to the railroad here behind the depot, and the engine house over here, and then the Dolores River in front. And here's my model of that same town. You can see how there's the town up here, sort of, and the Pro Patria Mill, and the road running down, and the depot built from Blazek plans. A lot of stuff is built from Blazek plans. I'm going to forget to mention, and the dry bank of the Dolores River. And here is the engine house. And I'm sorry, I've forgotten whose kit this is, but it's a very nice kit. And I built that before I decided I'm not going to build anymore. Well, I don't build brick buildings anyway, and this is a brick building. And once I got this picture here, I noticed that it has a air gap here. So please excuse my slip here. This is a prototype picture of the yardmaster's shack, such as it was, in an old car body. And take a look at this neat rotted out section stuff here on the lower part of that building. And of course, here's some storage down here, and a switch stand here. And here is my yardmaster's house with the rotted out stuff. And that was fun to build. Jim Vail, when he was, one of the times he was here, said he was going to build a model of it. I don't know if he ever, Dave, would you nod? Do you know if Jim ever built that? No, he didn't. Okay. I didn't know if he did or not. He said it was going to. Thank you, Dave. You're handy to have. For some reason, I can see you in my window and nobody else, but that's fine. So watch yourself up there. This is the prototype, a prototype picture of a three-way switch stand, a three-way switch, a three-way stub switch. I'm trying to get that out. And it led to the engine house here, and then down here to the main line, and back and connected with the main line. And then the switch stand was over here. I built mine in the back of a motorhome at the very, very tip of Cabo San Lucas. And while my wife was out on the beach, and so I took my soldering iron and a bunch of rail and other stuff with me down there, and built two three-way stub switches. And they both work fine. This one is controlled by a Tam Valley Depot servo and a frog juicer. Both are very cool, useful uses for this particular application. And that is a working switch stand there. Here's an abandoned store, which I'll bet none of my guys have ever really noticed. But I had that in the Gazette a long time ago, I think. And there's the main point of it is that there's no paint on it. Oh, those colors are all chalks, not powders, but old-fashioned chalks. So I just used chalk sticks and painted them up with those, over alcohol and ink in most cases on that. Here is the famous Pro Patria Mill, and if you're going to build the RGS, you have to build the Pro Patria Mill. I scratch built this from Blazek plans, and I built it to 80% of the real size. We're going to move on now and look at the track plan of the two levels, with Vance Junction on the lower level and Rico, where we just were, on their upper level. And since I took the helix out, it means we have an elevator there now. And now I'm going to show you some very high-tech motion photography here. As a train leaves Rico on the upper level, going by the Pro Patria Mill, and it's going to go through, enter into this, behind this cut here on the upper level, and it's going to come out here down here on the lower level. That's what is my model of the Ilium Y. In as much as this leg goes to Telluride, this leg goes to Vance Junction. And since the RGS had no tunnels, I just had to make up a tunnel portal. So I hope that looks like a narrow gauge tunnel portal. And that's what you get. So here is the train emerging from a mouse hole. Actually, it's not going to emerge. It stopped there. It stopped in a mouse hole in my shop. And so the conductor now pushes the elevator up button, and here's the elevator. So now watch, and this is some more fancy photography. And I'm sorry, I'm changing the position of the camera here. The elevator goes up. I'm going to show you more detail on this in a minute. It reaches that mouse hole or tunnel portal, and then automatically the train continues on out onto the elevator platform. Now the engineer has left the throttle in the same position open all the time. Everything else, it stops and stops and goes all by itself, and that is managed through limit switches. The elevator actually goes up and down much slower. In actuality, it takes 16 seconds for it to get from one level to another. So, but now we're going to watch it. It didn't go down. I just changed the camera angle, and I'm sorry, my tripod didn't go as high as I wanted it to. So here we are now. The train has closed this limit switch here or here. I forgot which one that one was, and that powered the track here and the tunnel portal. And now the locomotive is going to come out to the end of the platform and stop, because it's on a dead piece of track, and it will not be energized until the elevator goes down. See, we call it the DeLea grade separation equalizer. Joe's the guy that was the chief mechanical engineer. He's the one that put me up to this and helped me greatly. We worked many evenings very late getting this thing going. So now here's the elevator going down, and hits a limit switch, and the train proceeds off the platform, off by my spray booth, and it emerges at that tunnel portal at the Ilium Y on the lower level. I'm sorry, I need a drink. Here's how it works. This diagram was published in Model Railroader in June of '09. And I think they did a good job diagramming it. Maybe they just copied my drawing, who knows? But it shows the drawer guides here, which then guide the traveling board here, on which the elevator platform is attached here. It is propelled by a screw drive. Now, originally, this was a garage door opener screw drive, and the garage door opener motor and mechanism was down here, underneath the whole thing. And I'm going to show you in picture now. And you can't see the garage door opener, but you can see this is a garage door opener screw drive shaft. And it attached to the platform right there. And it was easy to attach it and to lock it and unlock it. Although we never had to do that the whole time until the very end, when that old garage door opener died. This loop here has nothing to do with the elevator other than it constrained the size of the elevator platform. This is the Durango reverse loop. And this is how you turn the trains at one end of the layout in Durango. And I think everything else here is self-explanatory. Joe and I copied my friend Dick Roberts' elevator here in the San Diego area. He had done the same thing using a garage door opener. He used instead of using the Variac here, which Joe and I used to slow it down, he used a system of pulleys to slow his down. The total separation from the top and the bottom is 24.5 inches. And as I mentioned earlier, it took 16 seconds to go from top to bottom. It takes 16 seconds to go top to bottom. Now the track, the dead portions or the track sections that are controlled by limit switches. And here, if you don't know what a limit switch is, here's one at the bottom. Yes, that's throwing the bottom one. And here's one at the top, throwing the top one. And those power the dead sections of tracks. Here's pretty standard approach to the alignment plates, rail soldered on the brass plate, make it bulletproof. Now, not too long ago, well, I guess actually it's been a few months ago, but with the COVID, everything was on hold. But the old garage door opener died. And when I say old, I got it for nothing. I talked to a garage door repairman, and he said, yeah, if you want one, I'll give you one. I'm taking some to the junkyard. So the one I got was on its way to the junkyard, but he gave it to me for nothing. And it served us well for years and years and years. And Joe had programmed it so that it stopped correctly at the top and bottom, and it worked just fine for us. But it finally died, and it got really cranky, and so we had to replace it. My friend Robin Becker then helped me install this linear actuator. And for those who may not be familiar with what a linear actuator is, it is a stepper motor that creates motion in a straight line. And this is a screw drive here that goes up that shaft, very similar to the old garage door opener, except that this one is newer and modern and hopefully more bulletproof. This is the control box right here for the linear actuator. Now, here we are at Vance Junction on the lower level. And here's a prototype picture of Vance Junction taken. This, I've scanned this and out of one of the Sundance books, obviously the Sundance book on Telluride. This was taken from the road, I think, across the valley, because there's a great view from over there. And last time I was there, which is years ago, the tipple was still standing. I hope it still is there. You can see the depot here, which was in a car body. This is actually the depot in the car body. This is the section house here. And these are bunk houses here and tool shed. And then the coal tipple is down here. And here's my model of it, along with my friend Jake Johnson, the professional model builder that works in Hollywood stuff. I've forgotten whose kit he built to make the depot here, and he weathered it up pretty good. And then also he did the tool shed and the bunkhouse here and the tool shed. I built the section house, and as you can see, it was looking pretty tired by 1939. I had a lot of fun building that. That poor boy standing there down there at the outhouse, he's been standing there for years. I'm getting a little worried about him standing there. Here's a picture of the coal tipple. This was a Crystal River kit. And now, and Mike Blazek scratch built a tipple that's on the cover of the last month's July-August Gazette. That was a Mike Blazek scratch built tipple. Mine's a kit. And here's my model, my Gazette cover photo of that same tipple and the section house in the background. Now we're going to move around through the Ilium Y here, around through a very narrow area. This is a very narrow section, but there's a little tiny bit of scenery there. And Greg painted, there's a backdrop here. And now we're going to go into Telluride on the lower level of the peninsula. And I'm going to show you here, we're on the lower level. Here's Telluride here in the cross section. Prototype picture. How's my time? Okay, I'm good with that. In this aerial photo, you can see the Conoco depot and the Conoco oil distributor, the depot, what I think are the coal sheds here, and the tank, of course, and what I think is the Knuckles packing building down here, at least what I decided to call the Knuckles packing. So here is my Telluride with a lot of kits here for the brick buildings and lots of scratch building stuff too here. Conical oils down here, depot of course is here. The coal shed, such as it is here. I'm from Southern California. I didn't see a piece of coal till I was 35. So I don't even know what a coal shed looks like. So I'm hoping that my coal shed looks like a coal shed. I'll show you a picture of it in a minute. The water tank, knuckles packing here, and other iconic structures back in here on Main Street. This was what I call a dog-eared Y, or a fold up and fold down Y. This latch here, which holds this brace in place, is also an electrical contact. And when it is closed, it throws the main line, the two turn louts to the main line. Excuse me, when it's closed, it throws them to the Y. What's wrong with me? When it's closed, you want them to go out on the Y. Anyway, there's an interlocking with some relays there that align the switches appropriately. So when it's open, then you can put it back down, and I don't show it down. There is my coal shed, and you can sort of see the power lines here a little bit. My friends Dave Balzer and Herb Koenig from St. Louis collaborated to build that water tank. Scratch built it. Here's the prototype depot. Again, not much adornment here. Pardon me, hold on. And here's my model of that depot. It's the back of the depot, actually, but it is the side that I had to model. The only RGS signature here is the fretwork on the awning brackets. That's Jim Vale's train here, and this is BB and Clay here, and I'm going to talk more about that train later. But I wanted to show you that because that's not my train, that's Jim's. Here's a picture that I found this online somewhere, and it was called simply the Telluride Miner's House. And I thought it was pretty cool, interesting building with, of course, board and batten siding, corrugated roofing, and this covered stairway here. And here's my model of it. Pardon me. And a neat thing for an author is a guy, I did write this up in the Gazette, and a guy wrote an article or a letter to Bob Brown for the Pigeonhole, along with a picture of his miner's house. And I think he did a better job on it than I did. But I was very flattered that it's nice when you're an author to know that somebody's actually reading it, because I don't think my own friends read my articles. So it's nice to know somebody is out there when you do publish an article. Here's the prototype Hotel Sheraton, and it is still standing. I had a very expensive dinner there years ago. And here's my model of that Hotel Sheraton. Jake Johnson, again, the pro model builder, combined 3 kits here to build the main structure of the hotel. I did the sign here and this sign hanging out. And I spent a lot of time building this thing. It was built, it was Photoshop, or I should say Photoshop elements I used to do the lettering and the design, pardon me. And then made a decal and wrapped around some styrene. And that was a fun project, building that thing. In 1969, I had occasion to be in Telluride by myself on a Saturday night, and I had dinner there at the La Paloma restaurant. And I loved the architecture of that. I thought I got to go back tomorrow, take a picture of it. So note that the corrugated siding here and the stone walls and the corrugated roofing and the awning with a wood vestibule down here. Redwood, it almost looks like redwood. I know it's not redwood there, Telluride, and here's my model of that with the red vestibule and some mining and supply kind of stuff out there. I don't know what you'd have at a mining supply place, but I put some stuff out there and we spot cars back and forth. Oh, the walls were, I did those by casting commercial mold. I used commercial stones on this one. And then carved them and made and also made you can see where it's indented here, and it would have been easier, I think, to just carve them. But this was the commercial casting is better than I can carve. Yeah, as you will see, I might add. Here's a Conoco service station. And I don't know if there was a Conoco service station or not. The sign looks awfully new here, awfully fresh. I need to weather that. And it's the Hermsmeyer and Sons garage. And this Model T over here was missing a wheel. I mean, literally missing a wheel. I had no idea where it was. And so I put it up on blocks. I thought, wait a minute, why don't I just put that next to the garage? So it's been there missing the wheel for some time. And this poor guy's been under there for a long time too. Here is the FD Work Company, the iconic FD Work hardware company. It was long gone in '39, and I built it from a kit, and I had to have it. And here's the Baths building. Also, the RGS guys will recognize that, I hope, even though mine is badly, way over weathered. My apologies for that. My friend Steve Bradley, who's going to be doing his tour, I think in a couple months, of his layout. Is an architect, and he saw that I had built these buildings with no bracing on the back of these false fronts. And he said, no, you can't do that. You have to do bracing. So Steve instructed me, thank you, Steve, for instructing me on how to do that bracing properly. And I might add, Steve has looked over my shoulder and giving me helpful advice in other areas as well. Here's the Coors Bar I built from this picture here in the Sundance book. Here's the Conoco oil distributor built from Blazek plans. The prototype picture of the quote Knuckles Packing Company unquote. Herb Caning from St. Louis, a friend of Pete's, one of Pete's buddies that works where they work on each other's layouts. Herb was out here he likes to come out here in February, and he was out here in Southern California, and I asked him to draw plans of it for me. So he did, and I built it. These walls were cast out of hydrocal and then carved. On that day in 1969, that Sunday morning, I was out walking around, I saw this structure. And I thought, someday I'm gonna build that structure for my RGS layout. Because with an interesting roof line, of course, great weathering and so forth and so on. And then I noticed here had a light over the door, the window. But wait a minute, the light was over the window, and there was a sign right there that said Silver Bill. And sure enough, when the Sundance book came out on the RGS, here came this picture, and these are obviously not residences. Those are ladies of the night that were working there. And here's the building that I saw and photographed. And here's my model of it, as you can tell, business is pretty good there that afternoon. Now we're going to turn around from Telluride and look across the aisle at Placerville. And the picture here looks all the way across the whole end of the layout. And here you go. Here's one end with the stockyards, and then I'll work my way down, work you down there, all the way down to the Texaco distributorship down here, and the Dolores River out in front. Dolores River, San Miguel River, I'm sorry. Here's the stock pin. Looks like a stock pin, I hope. And this picture was taken by Mike Blazek, and it was real close to that stockyard. And so I wanted to build a model of it. So I did, and here it is. And it is real close to the stockyard on my layout too. Here's a prototype picture of the stockyard. And the reason I'm showing it here is because I wanted to show you this really neat barn. To me, that's what a barn ought to look like. And I asked Mike Blazek to draw me just one of the afternoons that he was here with the guys. He drew me, just sketched this up for me. And then I built it. Instantly I published this, and Mike was not happy that I had published this because he had never published an unfinished architectural rendering before, and he was not happy that I had done this, and I forgot to ask him permission. So I'm sorry, Mike. Again, here's my model of it, drawn from that nice Blazek plan, a custom Blazek plan. The siding is just ink and alcohol, and then weathered individually on the workbench with chalk. Great prototype picture of Placerville. You can see the stone store here, the stone garage here, the depot here, San Miguel River right out here in front, and a couple of warehouses here and here. I guess that's all that I want to show you here on this one. And then here's my model. Here's a picture of my section of the layout showing some of those things. It also shows a couple of the residences here, which I'll talk about in a minute. The stone store, the stone garage, the warehouses, and the depot on the river. I just love this picture for a couple of reasons. One is it's about my era, and I think it just really depicts a nice sleepy Saturday afternoon there in Placerville in about maybe 1939, who knows. But the interesting thing about it was this residence, and it had this extended roof line here and a couple of big posts. I don't know what those were, but they're pretty big, holding up the end of that roof line. And even Mike Blazek couldn't figure out what it was about or why that happened. But I had to build it. I thought it was interesting. The one next to it was very standard Midwestern construction with a nice porch out here, 2 stories, with a window up in front. So here are my two models of the residences with this one with the extended roof line, and this one, the porch, and this schoolhouse down here. I modeled it and placed it on the layout backwards because I wanted this end was the interesting end I wanted it to show. My wife and I had a picnic behind it years ago. I guess that was in 1992, because this is my 1992 300ZX parked in front of the stone store. And I used this along with other pictures as my prototype picture for my build of the stone store. And there's my stone store here. The residences you saw earlier, the school, gas station here, and a train coming into town here. I think this took second place in Houston, or I think it was Houston. Maybe it was Sacramento. Probably lost to Ken Ellers. I don't know. If he was in it, I lost, I imagine. So here's Blazek's photo of that beautiful stone garage. And he drew plans of it, I built it, casting the walls with hydrocal and then carving them and then affixing them to each other and making the structure, building the whole structure. Jimmy Simmons of Monster Model Works came by one time. He visited with when the guys were all here. He came several times as a member, and he wound up making a kit of this structure as well as the stone store. Are both kits available now? I think they're available on the Monster Works website. Here's a prototype picture of the depot. You can see some missing shingles here. And that's why I wanted to show you this particular picture, because people didn't believe me when I built this with all these missing shingles, that this operating depot would have all those missing shingles, but it did. A couple of the warehouses, birds on the roof of the feed and seed warehouse there. And this is a picture that Mike Blazek took of the Texaco distributorship. This is the loading dock and the office and warehouse there, and you can see there's a cradle for 2 tanks originally. So I built it with 2 tanks. I'm having to hurry here a little bit. Here's my 2 tanks, and I'm hoping these look like weld lines. I used Archer decal rivets for those. And I hope they look kind of like rusty weld lines. The Harris Oil Company logo here on this truck was my dad's logo. He had a petroleum distributorship in Imperial, California. back in the 60s and 70s, and that was his logo. Here's the loading dock. Roof on that's pretty bad condition. And now we're going to look at the track plan again and move around to Dallas Divide. There was a steep grade, and I don't remember how far this was or what that grade was, but it was a very, very steep grade now going up to Dallas Divide out of Placerville. And here is my model of Placerville, or excuse me, my model. This is the prototype picture of Placerville with the section house. I'm way behind here on my paper, watching my notes. The bunkhouse, this is the bunkhouse here. This is the section house, speeder shed over here, and the storage shed down here. And I tried to replicate on my layout and all over the layout, the RGS dirt ballast. And notice the square profile ties here. I always ordered square profile ties for my layout. And then if I do over ballast them, there's still ties sticking out the ends. And here is my depiction of that scene, sort of. The train's coming up the grade through a cut, and here's the bunkhouse and the section house and the speeder shed and the and a shack, storage shed. These are proto 87 spikes. I thought you large scale guys might like to see the spikes that we use in HOn3. How crazy we are. Here's the stockyard at Dallas Divide. And here is the prototype picture of the farmhouse. And I just thought that was such a neat picture, that neat thing modeled, a neat structure. I wanted to model that. So here is my model of that structure. Now we're going to move on down finally, and I'm almost finished, Russ. I'm be done in just a minute. I know I'm running, starting about a minute overtime here. And I won't keep you guys on the East Coast up too late, I hope. Here's an aerial photograph of Ridgeway. And you can see here, this is the office building here. And of course, this is the roundhouse, the turntable. And this is a raised coal loading area where full gondolas were stationed, and then they were literally just shoveled into the locomotives. That was the main coaling facility for the Rio Grande Southern. But notice all the other stuff over here, and the barn here, the boneyard, a bunch of old stuff stored over here. And that's what I plan to model, not doing it yet. But in fact, on Saturday, when my guys are here, we're going to have a detail painting party. And we're going to paint up a bunch of details to clutter up all that area. Here's my office depot. These are both CC Pro kits, and my roundhouse. And the turntable, Steve Bradley, the architect I mentioned earlier, built that for me. And I'll show you another view. This is the prototype view now from the other end. A great junkyard here, fun to model that, and we will. And then here's a bunch of old stuff just stored there. And here's the sand house here. I don't have any sand in mine yet, but here my sand house is built, and I have a couple other structures built down here. My track work is all in. I'm working right now on the depot that will go right in here. Here is the roundhouse. And I spent way too much time building these details. Didn't build the details, but I painted them. Building the workbenches and detailing all this, when I should have been doing other stuff that showed, because I don't take the lid off of my roundhouse. It's going to stay just with the lid on. One final note here, and then I'm done. And that is a couple of years before he died, Jim Vail came up with an idea to collaborate with Craig Simonton. And Craig, I hope you're still on. I saw you were on earlier. To collaborate with Craig and me to do an article in the Gazette. And it wasn't published for a number of reasons. And eventually Dave Adams helped us. He went back and dug the article out of Jim's computer after Jim was gone, so that we could get this article published. So I'm going to read here This was in the July, August of 2018 Gazette. And these are Jim's words. Briefly, Steve Harris, Craig Symington, and I share a common interest, more a fanaticism for narrow gauge model railroading. But since we live many miles apart, we rarely have a chance for all three of us to get together. But when we do, it's always fun to run a train on each other's layouts. So the idea struck me to run and photograph a train, the same train, on each of our HOn3 layouts, and to share the photos. Steve, Craig, and I decided we would use this train for the fantasized, last trip by the famous photographers and historians Lucas Eby and Charles Clegg, as I had suggested. And so here's that train that Jim built on his layout, on his trestle. Here it is on Craig's layout at his Vance Junction tipple. And this is in Thunder Bay, Ontario, by the way, not anywhere close to Santa Cruz, California. And this is on my layout. You saw this picture already, but here it is as it departs my layout, going up the grade. Here is the final view of the Beebe and Clegg train going up that layout. So I'm very grateful to Dave Adams for helping to get that article published, because it means a lot to me to have had that last article of Jim's published, and it would have meant a lot to him too. So now I'm finally open for questions. I think I'm only 5 minutes late here, Russ.
Well, thank you very much, Steve. That was a wonderful presentation. I really like your use of prototype pictures and your ability to replicate the photos in your models. You did a great job. We do have a couple of questions. Let me see. John Shear asks, he says, do you need ISO to be, oh, that's wrong. Sorry.
Yes.
I'm in the wrong area here. Keith Stamper says, what brand of DCC system is used, and do you use Keep Alive devices in your locomotives?
I can't use the Keep Alive because the locomotives would run off the end of the platform, off of the dead section of track, off of the elevator platform.
Yeah, good
So
point.
I cannot use Keep Alives. I wish I could, and I would if I could. But for that reason, I can't, because sooner or later, some visitor would come and be running trains and wouldn't know what to do, and he'd run a train off the end of that layout, off of that platform. And I did put one on the floor, incidentally, off the upper level during R&D. And Dave Garcia, who I mentioned earlier, the late great Dave Garcia, brought it back to life for me. Okay. So the answer to your question regarding the DCC, that was built for me especially, and it's not for sale. So it's really not a commercial product.
Okay, John Shear liked your retaining wall in Ophir and wanted to know how you did it.
I build my retaining walls, including this one, flat on the workbench. And the first time I ever built one, you put wax paper down underneath it. I built a cardboard frame first, I should say, to exactly the pattern that I want. So the cardboard would have been fit out to this shape right here. My picture's still up there, isn't it, Pete? Is it?
Yes.
You see that? Okay, at least part of it. And so I cut out the cardboard base, and then put wax paper over that, and then built up the cribbing on top of that cardboard and wax paper. And the reason the wax paper was there then, and then I sprinkled all of the rocks and dirt in, and using decomposed granite if I could, so it wouldn't congeal and make mud. And then I was impatient. I thought, I'm just going to see what happens if I drop some ACC in here, or whatever you call it nowadays. And I did, and sure enough, it worked. So that's the way I built all of my cribbing.
Interesting. John Shear also asks what prompted you to eliminate the helix, but I think you covered that pretty well, saying you just got tired of watching your trains run around the helix 7 times to get up to the new level.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yes, that was the basic reason.
And finally, Scott McLeod says Tipple at Vance Junction has been restored by the Forest Service.
Good.
Great.
Thanks, Scott. I appreciate that, Scott.
Okay, thank you very much, Steve. We really appreciate it. You have a beautiful layout.